If you broke a bone right now, you already know exactly what to do. Call for help, get an x-ray, or a cast for 6 weeks. No hospital exists 40,000 years ago. No ambulance, no antibiotics, no ibuprofen for the pain, no clean bandage from a sealed package. Just your tribe, some plants, and whatever your own 2 hands can still manage to do. And yet, one skeleton, found in a cave in northern Iraq, proves something that sounds almost impossible. A man who should have died young somehow lived into his 40s instead. The strangest part? By the time he died, he could barely see, couldn't hear at all, and had only one working arm. This is Knock. In his world, there is no word for doctor. There's only your tribe and a handful of plants somebody's grandmother taught you to trust. And whether the people around you decide you're still worth keeping alive. No clinics here, no waiting rooms, no prescriptions written on paper, no pharmacy shelf stocked with pills. Just wounds, fevers, broken bones, and whoever happens to be standing nearby when they happen. Get badly hurt in Knock's world, and your survival depends far less on medicine than on the people standing closest to you, right at that moment. In 1957, archaeologist Ralph Solecki was digging in Shanidar cave in what is now northern Iraq. He found a Neanderthal skeleton unlike almost any other discovered before it. This man, now known as Shanidar I, had suffered a crushing blow to the left side of his face at some point. It likely left him blind in that eye for the rest of his life. His right arm had been broken so badly it was amputated probably near the elbow decades before he actually died. His right leg showed old, healed injuries that would have left him with a permanent, awkward limp. None of that alone killed him. Somehow, he kept living anyway, year after year, decade after decade, far longer than most people around him. In 2017, researchers Eric Trinkaus and Sebastian Velat studied the inside of his ears and found something else entirely unexpected. Bony growths had slowly sealed his ear canals, almost completely shut over time. This man had been profoundly deaf for years, maybe for most of his entire adult life. Picture it honestly for just a second. Blind on one side, completely deaf, missing an arm, limping badly on one leg, in a world with saber-toothed cats and freezing winters waiting outside the cave. He could not have hunted anything himself. He could not have heard danger creeping up on him. He could not have outrun a single threat, no matter how slow it moved. And still, somehow, he lived into his 40s, which genuinely counted as old age for a Neanderthal living in his particular time. Trinkaus and Velat concluded he most likely required significant social support to reach old age. In plain language, someone fed this man for years. They never asked what he could give back. Someone walked beside him constantly, so he wouldn't wander straight into a ravine he simply couldn't see coming. Someone warned him, by touch alone, about threats he could no longer hear approaching himself. That is what healthcare actually meant, tens of thousands of years before hospitals ever existed anywhere. Not a building, not a diploma hanging on some office wall, not an insurance card tucked quietly in your pocket, just other people deciding over and over again that you were still worth the trouble of keeping alive. Then, your entire survival depended on whether your tribe loved you enough to carry you. Now, it mostly depends on whether your insurance happens to cover the visit. Care wasn't the only medical tool available in Knock's world, either. In a cave called El Sidrón, in what is now northern Spain, scientists eventually found Neanderthal teeth dating back roughly 48,000 years. Trapped inside the hardened plaque on those exact teeth were tiny traces of 2 specific plants, yarrow and chamomile. Here's the genuinely strange part. Both of those plants taste unpleasantly bitter, and neither one offers much real nutrition at all. In 2012, researcher Karen Hardy and her team argued these particular Neanderthals weren't eating yarrow and chamomile as dinner. They were treating themselves on purpose, deliberately choosing bitter plants for what those plants could quietly do inside their bodies, not for how good they tasted going down. Modern medicine still borrows this same basic idea, pulling real drugs like aspirin straight out of willow bark. Same logic these Neanderthals seem to have already understood. That single small detail rewrites a lot of what prehistoric is supposed to mean to us today. Long before anyone ever wrote a medical textbook, someone had already noticed which plants eased pain, which ones calmed an upset stomach or fought off a stubborn infection. And they passed that knowledge on, mouth to mouth, parent to child, generation after generation, without ever writing a single word of it down. A few thousand years after Nock's own lifetime, once farming had slowly begun to spread across the land, healers took an even bigger, far riskier gamble. They cut small, round holes directly into a living person's skull, using nothing sharper than flint or obsidian. No anesthesia whatsoever, no sterile tools, no understanding of germs at all. Some scraped the bone away, layer by layer. Others scored a circle and lifted out one clean disc, or drilled a tight ring of holes and chiseled out the piece in between. You naturally assume almost everyone who went through that died right on the spot. The evidence says otherwise, and honestly, it's genuinely stunning. Archaeologists have found skulls like this across parts of Europe and South America. This wasn't one isolated genius. It was knowledge that spread, tribe to tribe, across enormous distances. Around the edges of many ancient skull holes, archaeologists keep finding smooth, rounded bone. Clear proof the wound kept slowly healing for months, sometimes years, after the surgery ended. Researchers estimate somewhere between 50 and 80% of these ancient patients survived the operation entirely and went on living afterward. That's a genuinely higher survival rate than skull surgery performed during America's own Civil War, thousands of years later, using actual steel instruments and real medical training. Quick question, while you're here, if you got seriously sick or badly hurt 40,000 years ago, who would you trust to keep you alive? Drop a name below. Nock's honestly curious who made your list and why. Step back for a moment, and a very different, much bigger picture starts to quietly form. This wasn't one lucky survivor, one lucky plant, or one lucky surgery performed by chance. It looks like an entire quiet system, working steadily in the background of ordinary prehistoric life. A system built from grandmothers who remembered which leaves helped a fever finally break. From strangers willing to carry someone who could no longer walk on his own. From healers brave enough to cut into a living human skull and simply hope for the best. Modern medicine didn't invent the basic impulse to heal each other. It just built proper buildings and hung diplomas around something humans were already quietly doing. Tens of thousands of years earlier, around a fire, with almost no tools beyond attention and time. The single most convincing proof of ancient medicine was never a scalpel or one clever plant or a hole carefully cut in a bone. It was a blind, deaf, one-armed man who somehow still lived into his 40s, purely because the people around him refused, again and again, to let him disappear. Ash, for the record, still limps a little from a bad fall he took last winter. The whole camp still quietly saves him the best scraps anyway, without anyone asking why. Some habits, it turns out, are far older than any of us ever realize. You'll probably never need a stranger to carry you home because you're blind, deaf, and missing an arm entirely. But you've almost certainly been cared for at some point by someone who owed you absolutely nothing in return. A parent up all night beside your fever. A friend who quietly sat with you through something genuinely painful. A stranger who simply noticed you were struggling and helped anyway without being asked. Healthcare, it turns out, was never really about the hospital building itself. It's really about whether anyone, anywhere, bothers to stay. So, how did ancient humans actually survive without doctors? Not through pure luck alone, and honestly, not through raw toughness alone either. They survive because somebody, somewhere, chose again and again not to leave them behind. A blind, deaf man cared for in a cave in Iraq. A neighbor quietly eating bitter chamomile for a stomachache. A patient somehow waking up after a hole was cut straight into his own skull. Same fragile human bodies. Same quiet fear of dying alone. Same human, different world. If you've been badly hurt back then, would your own tribe have kept you? Tell Knock honestly below. Next time, what actually happened the very first time two tribes who had never met before came face to face?